Our modern life is built on energy. We use it to heat, to cool, to light up our cities. It powers our cars and flies our planes. It fills our stores and keeps us switched on and plugged in.
This is the Africa Energy Report. I am Bosin Omofaye. A worldwide energy revolution is on the way, with countries implementing new measures and adopting more independent and sustainable ways of producing energy. And while Africa is very much at the center of the debate, many countries on the continent still lack even basic access to energy resources. So how is Africa taking the green energy turn?
So how can we get energy with the least amount of carbon emissions? First up on everyone's green energy list, the sun. Solar power is the poster child for transforming our energy system.
There's huge potential. If you look at the numbers, the amount of solar energy reaching the surface of the Earth is 100,000 terawatts. And the amount of energy that civilization is using for all of its purposes today is 17 or 18 terawatts. This makes solar energy enormously attractive.
You know, you only need a few square meters of solar panels for every person in the world to actually generate all the energy of the world. The reason we don't do that is it's still too expensive. Solar panels cost a lot of money. The question is, can we make photovoltaics cheap?
Making solar power cheaply is now the goal. And with billions at stake, there is a race on to do it.
Recent stats indicate that out of the 10 fastest growing economies in the world, 7 of those over the next 5 years are going to come from Africa. There are 1.1 billion people on the African continent. There's an abundance of natural resources, oil, gas, platinum, gold. The story is a bright one for Africa. But there are challenges, and we know that. So looking at those positive stats, you've got to compare them to the stats where we bring energy poverty on the continent to the fore. 7 out of 10 Africans do not have access to electricity. 90 million children go to school without access to electricity. 2% of South Sudanese and Burundians have access to electricity, and 3% of Liberians have access to electricity. So the challenge is enormous, but because of the challenge, there are fantastic opportunities for investor, and especially for foreign direct investment into the African continent, to close that gap and to get the energy environment into a thriving arena on the continent. I think at this point,
important things you have to look at is this. Look at Africa with the number of people we have there. 1.1 billion people, and reverse that. You have a continent with the largest cocoa plantations, and yet how many chocolate factories do we have on the continent? You have a continent with huge natural resource base around iron ore, etc. Yet we import steel. We have a continent with the third or fourth in reserves of oil, yet we're importing petroleum products. We have a missing middle. And this, for me, I see Africa as an opportunistic position based around capitalist structure, creating value on a continent with 60% of very young, smart, intelligent, and educated people. The focus of seeing Africa, from my point of view, traveling around Africa, is creating and energizing those opportunities. So if you look at Power Africa itself, Power Africa is an amazing thing from the American point of view. It's marketing America in Africa. But the realistic position is, as Africans, whatever we see to evaluate is, do we take and seize this American opportunity?
So it's irrelevant whether it's been prompted by Chinese influence on the continent or not?
It doesn't matter. The realistic position is we have opportunities on the continent. We need the power to energize the growth on the continent. I'll give you a typical example. Look at Nigeria. We have an economy that's the largest in Africa today. We've got a huge potential of growth, numbers in population, yet the power being generated is 3,000 megawatts. It tells you if we could grow at 7% and above, if we're generating 20,000 megawatts, just look at what that transition sends into our economy. So it's an amazing potential, and the same right across Africa. So this is the strength of what Africa has to offer the world. Traveling around the world in a lot of conferences where we have savvy investors looking at the continent, I think we miss a point. The point is the interest of the continent is known, the buzzing population, entrepreneurship on the continent is known, but we've got this grand idea on all these grand projects. That's why the 7-10 years. What stops us investing in the 50, 60, 70, sub-100 megawatt projects? Those are the quick wins.
Are those the projects off the grid?
Yes, those are the quick wins. We need to get the investments together. Those are projects that could be online in 12 months. That's what you get into the system to energize economies. If we're looking at this 1,500 megawatts, you're talking 6-7 years. The burning population of Africa, the youths, are not waiting for that.
Rwanda, one of Africa's strongest emerging markets, produces 100 megawatts of power, but only 16% of the country's population has access to electricity. The Rwandan government hopes to connect the country's 11 million people to electricity by 2017, using a mix of geothermal energy, solar energy, peat to power, biogas, methane gas and hydropower. Rwanda plans to generate 1,150 megawatts by 2017. 320 megawatts will come from hydropower, 320 from methane gas, 310 from geothermal, and 200 megawatts from peat. This excludes the 8.5 megawatts from the country's first photovoltaic solar plant, which the government signed a 25-year purchase agreement for in April 2014. Through public-private partnerships in Rwanda, access to electricity has increased from 6% in 2008 to 16% in 2012. The government hopes to increase this to 70% by 2017 and plans to spend around $4.7 billion to achieve this.
We know that a prosperous economy cannot live without energy, and that a sustainable economy cannot live without green energy. The question is, can biofuel help deliver a future that is more prosperous and economically sustainable for Africa? Let's look at some of the facts. Africa imports 60% of its energy, and only 32% of sub-Saharan Africans have access to electricity. Many Africans rely on firewood and charcoal for basic needs such as cooking, but these energy sources are dirty, inefficient, expensive, and have negative health impacts and contribute to deforestation. For everything from transport to lighting, nearly all fuel is imported, making life on the continent unnecessarily costly. In a word, unsustainable. But we can develop alternative domestic sources of energy for Africans in Africa. From ethanol and biogases for clean cooking to transport using these fuels along with biodiesel too. Biofuel can go a long way to improving the environment while boosting the economy. And here's how. Bioenergy provides a unique opportunity to leapfrog fossil fuel and go straight to clean. Mobile phones did it in Africa, leaving fixed telephone lines behind, and bioenergy can do the same thing. The production and use of biofuel, if done responsibly, can create a beneficial cycle and help communities become more sustainable. Locally, biofuels for cooking can free time for other beneficial activities, such as home-based businesses and education, while improving household air quality. The actual production of biofuel creates local markets where crops are processed into valid added goods, including energy and animal feed. On a large scale, biofuel can provide Africa with badly needed infrastructure, employment, and energy independence, while at the same time allowing it to export more goods and services to the world market. But what about all this talk about high food prices, you ask? Aren't biofuels to blame? In actuality, occasional spikes in food prices are increasingly tied to the cost of oil. Higher oil prices means higher tractor diesel, fertilizer, and transport prices, which trickles down and makes everything else more costly. And that includes food. While there are many factors behind food prices, relying on costly fossil fuels is at the heart of the problem. Biofuel has no more impact on local food security than any other kind of agricultural land use. Biofuels should be seen as they are, an opportunity. Don't you want to help?
Minister for Agriculture, Dr. Akinwumi Adesina, to discuss the developments in the biofuel production in the country.
We want to be able to feed ourselves, not just feed ourselves. We want to be a major player in global food markets. We've got everything to do that. We've got about 84 million hectares of land, of which no more than 40% of it is utilized. We've got a lot of water, 263 billion cubic meters of water. We have cheap labor, and we have a big population of 167 million people to feed, obviously. Without that potential, we can't eat it. We've got to turn it into real incomes for ourselves. For example, we are the largest producer of cassava in the world today. We produce 40 million metric tons of cassava per year. And there are technologies today that can even allow our yields to go up from about 14 tons per hectare or 15 tons that we get today to even 80 tons per hectare. So that additional production, quite a lot of it can also go into biofuel. I'll give you an example. Right now, ethanol is a big issue. We are looking in Nigeria right now in our cassava value chain at the utilization of cassava for doing ethanol. We have a company that is a Sunboard investment company. They are actually investing today in close to about 50,000 hectares in different parts of Nigeria in ethanol production from cassava. But we are making sure, though, that we don't have a competition between the use of cassava for food and the use of cassava for making fuel. And that's why new technologies are very important. We're very supportive of that. We are also looking at the use of sugarcane, for also making ethanol. And jatropha makes a very good thing for actually making biodiesel. So these are the things that we want to do, but I want to make sure that there's no competition between use of any of our ag commodities, food or for fuel.
Do you think African countries very rich in agriculture can actually use agricultural produce as a game changer into a new world of energy?
Well, I think it depends really on what you're trying to use. For example, jatropha is grown all across Africa. It doesn't compete with food, and so you can use jatropha very well for producing biodiesel. If you look, for example, using sugarcane, you can grow commercial sugarcane and use it for ethanol production, just like they do in Brazil, and you are not competing with food supply. You can, of course, use cassava, as long as you make sure you're producing a lot more cassava and you're not, driving up the price of food, which is basic for our people. I think that's important. But don't forget, there are second-generation cellulosic technologies today for actually making, biofuels, and we have to take advantage of all those cellulosic technologies to do that. So I think it's a new area and one that we are watching closely, but willing to play it.
So you think food first, energy later?
I think without food, you can't drive a car. And so I think food first, energy also will go with it. But I think we must do sensible and pragmatic approaches in getting biofuels done. I think it's an area that we should look at, but we have to be conscious of the fact that we still have a lot of people to feed, got a lot of stomachs to feed with food before I have to worry too much about tanks of cars.
The plains of Turkana, vast arid lands in the north of Kenya where wind blows consistently from the southeast at an average of 11 meters per second. Untapped for all these years, this resource, up to 162 square kilometers, is about to pump in up to 300 megawatts of electricity into the Kenyan electricity grid. This comes after the African Development Bank committed an initial $149.5 million in financing. Another $400 million is required to reach financial closure, and discussions are ongoing with the European Investment Bank, Denmark's official credit agency EKF, Properco, and the Bank of South Africa, among others. Co-arrangers will be South Africa's Nedbank and Standard Bank. The government of Kenya will provide a partial risk guarantee to protect the project against the risk of delays. Groundbreaking is expected around September of this year, and construction should take 36 months. Once complete, the project is built to be the biggest wind farm on the continent and should save the Kenyan government up to $30 million currently spent on diesel-powered generators to bridge the power shortage gap.
Kenya is a nation in the midst of rapid transformation. The East African country has a growing population of more than 40 million people and one of the fastest developing economies on the continent. Some people here are looking towards the rugged terrain of the Great Rift Valley for solutions to Kenya's pressing energy needs. The Volcanic Rift cuts a 2,000-kilometer-long incision through East Africa. It is formed by the slow splitting of the African continent into two large tectonic plates. The rift brings the heat of the Earth's core closer to the surface, which manifests itself in the numerous hot water springs and steam fumaroles found all along the rift. It is this geothermal energy that Kenyans believe can provide a large part of the energy they need.
Now we're in Olkaria, and this is where we have the geothermal power plants, the biggest plant in Africa.
Kenya is a pioneer and a leader in Africa when it comes to geothermal energy. The Olkaria 2 geothermal power plant produces up to 105 megawatts of electricity and sends it to the national grid. Nearby are Olkaria 1, the first geothermal power station ever built in Africa, and Olkaria 3.
For me, that I'm part of the team which is gearing to generating up to 5,000 megawatts by 2030.
Kenya's policymakers have set ambitious development goals for 2030 so that everybody here can satisfy their current and future energy needs.
We need a lot of energy, that is power, for driving our economy to boost our development. It's in the big vision of having Kenya have enough energy to drive its economy.
The big vision is to increase geothermal energy production by 25 times over the next couple of decades, ultimately accounting for about 30% of Kenya's targeted energy mix in 2030. Kenya's quest for energy is experienced intimately by the people in the nearby town of Naivasha. For them, the struggle to access energy is a part of daily life. Lacking sufficient energy sources, people consume charcoal, which is often produced by chopping down nearby protected forests, like those at the Hell's Gate National Park.
Bring us up to speed about the contributions of the African Development Bank in this regard.
One of the most important things the bank is doing right now is to assist countries which are undertaking reforms in the energy sector, because those reforms are extremely important and, in fact, a precondition for those billions you're talking about to eventually flow. I'll give you some specific examples. We are supporting Tanzania in the reform of the energy sector. We recently also offered some support to Nigeria. And only last week, the bank approved a $1 billion loan to Angola for the reform of this energy sector. Energy, in fact, crosses borders. It has a very strong regional character. We are working on interconnection projects, that is, with the regional power pools, to create links between countries to enable a power trade to happen. It's happening in West Africa, it's happening in Southern Africa through their respective power pools. And that is also a big incentive to investors, because you get economies of scale when the demand is higher than within the confines of a national border.
Tell us about the relationship between the African Development Bank and local finance institutions, perhaps the stock markets across Africa, in getting local investment resource into infrastructure.
Through our treasury in the bank, we do support countries that are interested in issuing bonds on the domestic capital market. We also have local lending possibilities. We also have recently extended the line of credit, for example, in Nigeria, to on-lend for energy efficiency projects supported by the private sector. So there is a clear outreach ongoing to get local investors involved in this energy sector. And maybe one more initiative you need to be aware of is the Africa 50, which has just been launched. Yet another opportunity of attracting investors, including the pension funds. A number of investors may get interested in this new vehicle called the Africa 50. To date, our current portfolio is in the region of $5 to $6 billion. And over the next 5 years, we plan to increase it by at least another $3 billion. So you're looking at $9 billion within the next 3 years. The African Development Bank, on its part, has, in the year 2013 alone, committed $670 million to the Power Africa initiative, which form Power Africa. You have Kenya, Tanzania, Ethiopia, Liberia, Ghana, and Nigeria. Those are the 6 countries. Our overall goal under Power Africa is to invest up to $3 billion, as I say, of which we have already committed.
On the sandy floor of Ethiopia's Guba Valley near the Sudanese border, engineers are laying ground for what will be Africa's biggest dam. The Renaissance Dam, being built along a Nile tributary, will create a lake 246 kilometers long and produce around 6,000 megawatts when fully functional.
Now we are on the right bank, exactly at the place where the dam is being built or constructed. So what you are looking in front is the dam blocks. So it means we are already started construction of the roller compacted concrete dam. So this is more or less now, that elevation is 500 meters above sea level.
Ethiopia has so far spent $1.5 billion on the project out of a total projected cost of around $4 billion. A bill the country says it will foot by itself. The bold decision has overturned generations of Egyptian control over the Nile's waters and may help transform one of the world's poorest countries into a regional hydropower hub. Ethiopia rejected an offer from Cairo for help financing the project, and in doing so ensured it controls the construction of the dam.
We have friends in Egypt, we have brothers in the Sudan, we have sisters in your country, across the region, across the continent, across the globe. So we call it, we consider this project as a people of the globe project being built in Ethiopia.
Italian construction firm Salini Impregilo, which is building the dam, says all payments have been made on time so far and has no concerns about Addis Ababa continuing to fund the project. But analysts believe that the country's decision to foot the entire bill alone carries the risk of stifling private sector investment and a slowdown of economic growth. Egypt, which has claimed exclusive right to control the river's waters for generations, is fuming. Cairo worries the dam will reduce the flow on which it has depended for drinking water and irrigation for thousands of years. It has demanded building be halted pending negotiations between the countries and offered to take on joint ownership of the project, an offer Ethiopia dismissed. According to economists, Cairo no longer wields the same leverage it once did when upriver sub-Saharan countries were too poor to build such huge projects themselves. Ethiopia, as it stands, is now gearing up for more projects. A government plan seen by Reuters would see Africa's second most populous nation target installed capacity of 37,000 megawatts within 25 years, far more than the World Bank's estimate of just 28,000 for the entire current output of sub-Saharan Africa excluding South Africa. Mahia Mutua, CCTV.